Good afternoon and welcome to yet another episode of the EQ Lunch and Learn. My name is Mucha Mlingo and I am delighted to be your host today. As always, we have a great conversation in store for you. And I'm looking forward to how we are going to wrap up the month of February. It's hard to believe it's February already. Where is the month going? Today, we're talking about leadership. Love and leadership is our topic. Leadership isn't just about strategy and decision making, it is about people. And at the heart of great leadership lies empathy. Today, we're diving into the power of love and leadership, how emotionally intelligent leaders create environments where trust, collaboration, and motivation thrive. When leaders lead with empathy, they don't just manage teams, they inspire them. In our conversation today, we'll explore how embracing emotional intelligence can transform workplace culture, strengthen relationships, and drive success. So get ready for an insightful conversation on the human side of leadership. As I always say, we have brought the learning. I hope that you are ready with your lunch. I have a great panel here with me today who are going to help me have this conversation about how to lead more effectively with empathy. So allow me to bring them on, and I'll start with Elsie. Elsie is a dear friend, and I am delighted to have her here with us today. She is a mother, a wife, a daughter, and a champion for growth. She is a registered counselor, marriage and family therapist, practicing an eclectic therapeutic approach. I'm sure she'll tell us more about that. She is a certified emotional intelligence educator with 6 seconds and a certified professional mediator with Dispute and Conflict Resolution International. She is an educator and a director at Mount Longonot Schools in Naivasha. Elsie is a devoted Christian, a truth seeker, and a member of the Toastmasters International. She enjoys reading good books and watching investigative programs. Elsie, it is so good to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, together with Elsie, we have Jeremy, who is with us as well. Jeremy Odiambo. Let me tell you a little bit about Jeremy. You can connect with Elsie, by the way, on LinkedIn. We've shared her LinkedIn link. Jeremy is a passionate lifestyle, food, and travel enthusiast. He believes in embracing new experiences and making every moment count. As a sales manager at Trademark Suites, he brings a deep understanding of the hospitality industry, curating unforgettable guest experiences. He has a background as a project officer and he's worked on a number of impactful initiatives, blending a love for community driven projects with professional expertise. Whether discovering hidden travel gems, indulging in culinary delights, or exploring new lifestyle trends, Jeremy is all about living a life to the fullest. Jeremy, it is great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining.
Good to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Awesome. Last but not least, we have Yukabeth Kidenda, who is joining us too, and it's great to have her here. Yukabeth is a visionary leader devoted to reshaping Kenya's educational landscape. Guided by her father's example, her journey began with early exposure to the realities of underprivileged communities. Part of her family deeply invested in community service, discovered her passion for supporting those in need through visits to schools, orphanages, and prisons. She has a bachelor's degree in business administration, and a minor in marketing from Strathmore University. And she has a deep abiding passion for improving the lives of those around her, which she believes is at the core of all development work. It's great to have you here, Yukabeth. If you'd like to connect with Yukabeth, you can find her on LinkedIn. Welcome, not for the first time. It's good to have you back here on this platform.
Thank you. It's great to be here and looking forward to today's discussions.
Fantastic. So this is who we have today having our conversation, and we're delighted to have them here today. I want us to dive right into our conversation, and we're going to kick off with a question that I'm going to ask of you all. And, it's February, or at least it's coming to the end of February, the month of love. And so we thought it would be great to talk about love from a leadership perspective. And our focus is on empathy. So I'd love to hear from you. What does empathy mean to you in leadership? Yukebek, I can start with you since I brought you on last. What does empathy in leadership mean to you? And how can leaders balance compassion and authority to create a workplace where love and leadership coexist without compromising on productivity? So we're starting with a big question, but I'd love to hear from you.
A huge question. So, what does empathy mean to me? I think empathy is the ability to see and be seen as humans and as a human. Um, and as I answer that, I think going into your second question, how do leaders balance empathy and authority? Um, I believe that first, as a leader, you must begin by seeing your people not as organizational assets, but as human beings, just as you are. And in every situation, asking yourself, how would I have liked to be treated? Um, and how would it make me feel if I was treated the way I just treated the next person? So I believe empathy is seeing people first as humans, humans with feelings, humans with more going on than just what's happening between the four walls of the office, um, and treating the next person as you would like to be treated. Yeah.
Recognizing that people are people. And I really like the point you made that there's so much more going on than what's happening in the four corners of the office. People have lives that they're living. Elsie, can I come to you next on your thoughts around empathy, what it means to you?
Yet, for me, empathy is all about understanding the people's feelings, perspective, and also their experiences. And you not only put yourself in the other people's shoes, but also realizing that those shoes are not yours. So they are other people's shoes. So there's a tendency of you trying to interpret things your own way and making judgments, but it's important to listen to what is really going on and coming from a point of understanding. And once you are empathetic, it enables you as a leader to know whether you're reaching the people that need to be reached and whether you're having the effect that you need to have with the people. And whether you are building a team and nurturing the people the way you need to do it, and whether you're inspiring them. And it's all about relationships and creating trust within that relationship. And so how you can balance the two, balance the compassion and the authority, is by understanding the human environment within which you're operating in and making predictions and being very intentional, showing respect to your colleagues, being very geared towards team building, making a team, being genuine and vulnerable. Those are some of the things I think you could do.
Very much for sharing. I like one of the things you said. Well, I like everything you said, but one of the things you said that jumped out at me is this idea of being intentional. I think that, that's really critical when it comes to being empathic as a leader. Jeremy, let me come to you. What are your thoughts on empathy and leadership?
I think empathy, specifically in leadership, comes about from a point where you understand and value other people's feelings, especially your colleagues, whether they're above or below you. So, as far as leadership is concerned, it is whereby I can create an environment, or whereby someone can create an environment whereby people feel valued and feel connected to you. This doesn't necessarily mean that we are lowering the standards of whatever we're doing, but we understand people's situations, understand their experiences, and understand their goals. That way, it creates maybe like an environment of mutual trust. So I can be empathetic of your situation while still working with you and making sure we hit whatever goals or targets we're supposed to hit. Because it's a very fine line between being empathetic and being in leadership. So yeah, it's about understanding people's feelings and creating an environment where they feel heard and listened to.
Yeah, I like that. So I think what I'm hearing from all of you is empathy really is about seeing people as people, right? And really hearing them. And to your point, Jeremy, there, that then finding that balance of being able to do that while still holding people accountable in the workplace. Yukibet, I want to come to you. I think I want to ask you something that's very closely related to what Jeremy said. So let me come back to you. As a leader of an organization with a big and vibrant team, some argue that empathy and leadership could slow down decision making. So how do you integrate this empathy while still ensuring efficiency, while still ensuring that as an organization you are able to move forward and achieve the kind of big, hairy, audacious goals that you have?
Thanks, Mucha. I think showing empathy within the organizational setting is a game of balance. And you will find that there are those instances where you will be able to extend that empathy. And in every situation, something will suffer. Where you have to extend empathy, something will suffer. But I think what you look at here is the opportunity cost, and ask yourself, whatever we are losing as an organization by being able to extend this empathy to this individual, is it something that we will be able to recover from quickly? And on the flip side, is it something that will set us back years? And in every situation, you have to be able to evaluate that. But I like what Elsie said about trust. There are situations where with the same employee, and in one instance, you will be able to extend empathy, and in the next, you won't be able to lend that hand that you otherwise would have wanted. And I think it's all about building trust, and showing intention. If you as a leader have a track record of listening and getting to know people beyond the surface and beyond what they do at work, showing that you care. And it's in small actions like asking people how their weekend was. It's in small actions like if they come to work looking a little more sad than usual, you want to know what's going on with them. So they have to be able to trust that you care, such that in the event that you have to make a difficult decision and you're not able to extend empathy because the opportunity cost on the business would be too great to bear, it's not a situation that's not salvageable. And in the future, where your hands are not as tied, you would be able to extend that empathy. So I think it's a game of balance, but the underlying principle here is that your team members have to trust that you care about them. That even though in this situation I wasn't able to extend empathy to you, I know that you care and your hands are tied. And in the next instance where your hands are not as tied, I will be able to get the support that I need. Yeah.
Great thought. This idea of weighing up the opportunity cost, and it goes back to the point Elsie made about intentionality. So that means that in every moment, I need to be making that determination with intentionality. And what you're then saying, Yukabeth, is that there are times where you are willing to bear a possible loss to the company for the benefit of your team, because in the long run, you know that is, the better choice in that instant, right? So you extend grace to someone, you extend that empathy to someone because you recognize that this is a critical need at the time. And so that then requires you as a leader to be able to balance the business with the people. I think that's a really great observation. Thank you very much for that. Jeremy, I want to consider the mental health side of things, right? So as a mental health champion, have you what have you experienced or what have you seen around a lack of empathy and how it impacts performance and engagement because of how it's impacted the mental well-being of the team. So I'm looking here at the relationship between, this empathy. And I like what Yukabet said, where in some instances I may not be able to go that extra mile that I would like to, but the team knows that if it were possible, I would, right? So what happens when that is not there from a mental health perspective, and how does this impact performance and engagement?
So from a mental health perspective, being honest, if you work at an organization, or if you work at a place where empathy and leadership isn't really relevant, or where the leaders aren't really empathetic of situations and possibilities of the staff who are there, it leads to a point where some colleagues may disengage. I think some people call it quiet quitting, whereby you just do the bare minimum not to lose a job, but you're not really putting your maximum output. You're not really doing the best that you can be. You're not really showing the best you can be. So you find people will be shy to have an open communication with their superiors. Will be a bit shy to talk about the skills, talk about ideas that they may have, even though they may be beneficial to the company. So it really demoralizes the team, as well as adds to a weight. So if rather than your job being your happy place, because more or less, on average, people spend 8 hours a day at their workplace. So if your job is not your safe space, if it's not your family, then you don't really give the output that you're supposed to give. You don't really become the best version of yourself you're supposed to be in that environment. So not only does it demoralize you, but it also shows less of you than should be there, than should be seen.
Yeah, I like that. And quiet quitting is definitely something that's very real, where people are not really giving of their discretionary effort, which ultimately bears to the ultimate goal of the organization and performance in and of itself, right? So in the end, you have individuals who are not engaged, to your point, and are not delivering, and that ultimately impacts the bottom line. So what I'm hearing very clearly is how we treat our people, right? And based on your definitions of empathy earlier, seeing them as people, recognizing they're humans, how we treat them impacts their mental health and ultimately impacts their performance. Um, Elsie, what are some of the psychological barriers that prevent leaders from being empathetic? What's holding leaders back from, fully embracing this idea of being an empathic leader? Because I think it's not new, this idea that empathy is beneficial for leaders. So what's holding leaders back?
From where I stand and how I look at it, it's the lack of self-awareness. There's a sense of where they're not aware about their feelings and how they appear, where their strengths and weaknesses, or recognize their emotions. So how they behave, they're blind, they have those blind spots which they have. So regularly checking in on themselves, or having somebody who can check on them, can really be helpful. Another thing is fear of failure. Yet we know that failure is inevitable, but when they feel threatened, then there's a tendency to not be empathetic. As a leader, they fear being vulnerable, and even to accept that they are not perfect. And that can also be a hindrance. They are not. So the solution there is to be transparent and share information with the team members and remain calm. Another hindrance I see is poor listening skills. They're there, but they're not paying attention to what the people are saying. They're distracted. And the solution is just to be patient with the employees and listen actively to what they're saying. Another thing is they're not listening or paying attention to their mental state. So, the body talks. And so when the body talks, it's very important as a leader to listen to what your body is saying. Because if you're tired as a leader, you don't even have the energy to listen to other people. So what can be a solution there is for them to practice self-care, which can be very important, where you say, I need some time out. Let me go do some mindfulness, or maybe journal, or do some gratitude thing there. Another thing is attitude, where they say your problems are yours they're not my problem. So keep your problems to yourself. And it's crucial that they eliminate this attitude problem, because what is affecting one person will definitely affect the whole organization. So it's important as a leader to pay attention and not just be dismissive. And also the kind of words that we use. We have to be very careful about how we talk to our people, and also how they see us, because you can really discourage people just by using the wrong words and create conflict in the organization. Another one is having this unhealthy competition within the organization. It needs to be healthy, where you're encouraging people to be better than who they were the last time so they can be successful. But when now you're bringing competition within the team members, then that can also be a barrier to being empathetic, because I'll be like, instead of looking at you as a fellow colleague who needs to be promoted, and I can help you, and maybe I know something you don't know, I look at you as somebody who is competing with me, which is not helpful. Yeah.
There's so much that we need to do in order to cultivate empathy. One of the things that you said that jumped out at me was this idea of developing greater self-awareness. And I think for me, this is so important, because I really do believe that self-awareness is critical for leadership success. And when we are lacking in self-awareness, sometimes we don't even realize how our behavior is impacting our teams, right? And as Jeremy says, people spend a lot of time at work. And so it's important to make sure that they're having a positive experience. So maybe a question that I can ask, and I can ask all of you to chime in. Jeremy, let me start with you. Does empathy in leadership look different at various levels of an organization, right? So is it a different type of empathy to someone who's at entry level, a peer who's at management, or an executive? And another thing, perhaps as you're reflecting on what empathy looks like in action, how has the shift to remote and hybrid work impacted this idea of empathy? So Jeremy, let me start with you. Then I'll come to the ladies thereafter.
Does empathy look different in different how does empathy look in different parts of the organization, right? That's your question.
Yeah.
I think especially for executives or people who are starting out, empathy towards them would look like support, would look like training them. Because as someone who's just starting out in a career that they may actually look at going 30, 40 years in, the support and the help and the training that you give them as they start or at their prior years would really be crucial to driving them towards being the best version of themselves that they can in that particular field. So empathy to them will look like that. While empathy, maybe as far as management is concerned, would look like maybe balancing what your team needs against what the organization needs. So that maybe would look like prioritizing work, restructuring the team as far as who can do what. So you pairing people with what they're strong at, and pairing people with who they can lift up, so that the organization is at par with what they're supposed to do. That's how empathy would look like, maybe from a managerial point of view. But has it changed ever since the hybrid work setting came? Yes, I do think it's changed, majorly because, especially maybe for managerial positions, it needs you to have trust in your team. So the whole perception of micromanagement that used to be there maybe in the early 2000s, where people would go to work straight from 8 to 5 and like you'd actually be able to stand over someone, doesn't really exist with the hybrid setting. So you have to trust that whatever deliverables is set for your team will be met, irrespective of you physically being there. So I think that's the shift that's happened in the hybrid setting. And I do think it's actually made more people productive, because not only do you have the freedom to work, but you have the freedom to push yourself to whatever limits you want.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Elsie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on those 2 points around, is empathy different at the different levels? And then how has empathy been shaped or impacted when it comes to the way we're working nowadays?
Yes, it does. it does make a difference at the various levels, because you notice as you're entering employment, you're looking at your IQ and technical skills, which will get you into that. That's at the entry level. But when you think about, there's a writer who wrote a book and said that what got you here won't get you there. So you may have gotten into the job, yes, but to get to the next level, you're going to go to the managerial level. Then if you aspire to be in leadership, there's an emotional element that is required. And this helps you to be successful in training other people, coaching the teams, and also reducing the stress, delivering feedback, and all that. And that's what emotional intelligence is all about. So you notice even research shows that EQ is more valuable, even when they are evaluating somebody. EQ is of most important to them, and also for promotion purposes, because you need to remain calm. You also need to be able to resolve conflict effectively and also respond to the workplace as a whole. So how has the shift to remote and hybrid impacted its role? It has, because it's becoming increasingly important, or research shows that many workplaces transition to hybrid environment, and that the manager's emotional intelligence and empathy were ranked highest. So it is making an impact. That shift is there.
I'd like to add on that point, your reflections on the need, especially as a leader who, whilst you may have direct reports, still interact with those who are lower down levels within your organization. So does empathy look different? Is it manifest in different ways across the different members of the team?
Yeah. Oh, I thought I've been thinking about this question very different, but more from a principle perspective, rather than the practical examples that have been given here. I think empathy will look different at different levels, because it's different people responsible for showing empathy at those different levels. And for there to be empathy at all levels of the organization, then empathy needs to become the culture of the organization. So as a manager, showing empathy to your direct reports, hoping that that would cascade down to their direct reports and their direct reports, until empathy becomes the culture in the organization. So yes, it will look different because it will be being extended at different levels, and also there's power dynamics there. So as a leader of the organization, you may have the leeway to make on the spot decisions and say, yes, don't come to work for the next 1 week. But at a different level, that decision might need to be taken to different levels. So what does empathy look like there? Actually just speaking to them and taking time to understand the situation, and even talk them through why they are not able to make a decision about that. So that's how I would say empathy looks different at different levels of the organization. In terms of hybrid, and the different working styles that we have right now, I'm a big believer that empathy needs some kind of connection. And without taking time first to connect to that individual, and I work in the field of education, and so we say you can't teach a child if you don't know this child, yeah, because different children have different learning styles, and so even different people have different empathy requirements. Some people would just want to speak, and that's enough for them, but some people would want more support and for you to act in a different way. So I would say that fully remote working environments, they definitely create a lot of joy, but I do feel like they affect connection. And so what empathy might look like there is because you're away from me, there's a kind of release for you to have the freedom to deal with your situation the way you want to, and you don't have to come to work every day living in that situation. But I also believe it affects the aspect of being able to connect with them on a human basis, have a conversation where you're able to pick up cues such as like body language. You're able to see if something you said made them despondent by just the way their shoulders like go down. So but the data, as Elsie has said, shows that like people are having higher levels of EQ. And I wouldn't want to argue with data, but I do believe that we should still make room for human connection. So even if you have a fully remote working environment, have an opportunity for people to come together at least once a month so you can connect and really get to know people on an individual level.
I really like, what you've said, and it's interesting to me how your responses are very much aligned. What I'm hearing very, very clearly is at the heart of empathy is the people themselves. And this goes back to the definition you all gave of empathy. Yukabeth, you talk about the fact that connection is required. And I think earlier, Elsie, you talked about really being able to listen to people. And so I think that, it means that how empathy is expressed is going to be different at the different levels. Partly because, to your point, Yukabeth, it's different people who may be expressing it. But even for you as a leader, if you're looking at how you are extending empathy across the different teams, it's going to be different because it's based on the need that is there. And that need is only known when you get to know people, when you connect with people. That is the only way that you're going to be able to extend empathy in a way that is valuable. So empathy really requires leaders to get to know their team. One of the things I always say is that, leadership really does need you to kind of come down from your high office and get to know your people so that you are able to connect with them. It's great. We have some people who are online with us. Shout out to you. Hi, Nancy. Great to have you here. This is indeed an important topic. It's great to have you join us online. If you're here online, please do say hi so that we can give you a shout out back. And if you watch this later, say hi all the same so that we can continue to connect with you beyond today's conversation. So we're talking about love and leadership. This is the month of love. And what we're saying is ultimately how leaders express love is through empathy. And we're just talking about what empathy looks like at the different levels. And we conclude that really it's about meeting people where they are. Jeremy, let me come back to you. So Millennials and Gen Z really prioritize mental well-being and work-life balance. And that's one of the things that came through in some of the comments you've already made. So how can leaders demonstrate empathy without being seen as too lenient? One of the conversations I have a lot with leaders, and especially leaders who've been leading for a while, who are leading Gen Z and millennials, the concern is, oh no, empathy is being soft. People will take advantage. So how do we make sure as leaders that we are empathic, but it's not something that comes across as being too lenient where now, anything goes and I can get away with murder?
That's a really good question that I have to think about for a minute. Definitely,
Yes.
one thing I'd have to say is just to echo what Yukabeth said, which was get to know your people, get to know the people you're working with. So that would basically involve normalizing well-being questions. Hi, how are you doing? How was your day? Just basically having conversations with your team about how they're doing, how their well-being is. That also opens the door for open communication. For sales is a numbers game. So definitely, at that point when you guys are having like open communication, the person can tell you, I need help with this and this, because you've already opened that channel whereby they can express whatever they're feeling. Another way to do it would be to set clear expectations as far as what they're supposed to do is concerned, but also giving them the freedom to do what they're supposed to do with how do I phrase this? Giving them the freedom of what they need to do, but with accountability. So
yeah.
that will tell you what you need to do. You will do it from the comfort of your couch, from the comfort of your bed. You definitely have to be accountable for your time and for the deliverables. So that would be that I think is one of the ways that leaders can actually show empathy while not being seen as too lenient or too soft, like you said.
Yeah. So I think, what's coming out is the idea that empathy must come hand in hand with accountability. And I think this is something that was also mentioned earlier, that, and I think Beth, you talked about the opportunity cost. So it means that as a leader, I'm making that determination and making sure that as I extend empathy, I'm mindful of the impact of this choice, and I'm also holding people accountable. And I think that's quite key. So thank you for that. Elsie, if we're talking about supporting our people, right, and we're talking about getting to know them, we're talking about extending empathy, right? What are some of the kind of structures that we can put in place, and what are some of the resources that we must put in place in order to make this empathy something that is now a culture, a way of life? So it's not just dependent on one leader, but it's something that we are all striving to do. So what are some of the resources that we must put in place that will ultimately help us to be empathic and support employee well-being?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It needs to be a collaborative effort between the manager and the employees so that they can continuously improve on what it is they have put in place so as to prevent and to promote the well-being and also the workers' health and also the safety in workplace. So one of the things some of the resources I was thinking about were having mental health literacy, individual mental health assessments, counseling, psychosocial support, also referral to treatments. If you see somebody is not well, just being able to refer them. I once attended a meeting and I heard about an institute in Nyeri where one of the lecturers was not doing well, and the university is actually supporting this particular lecturer through her struggle with mental health. And it was so encouraging to see this lecturer give the testimony on how this has been impactful. So you can imagine how much money the organization is investing in treating this particular lecturer and helping her with her journey of mental wellness. And then referral to treatment, there's a follow-up services, and also reintegration and recovery of employees. So it's just making it a team thing where there's the support being given to the employees to promote mental health, and also the preventing these challenges from happening, because some of these risks that are happening in the workplace, where some of these duties that the people are being given could be too much, and maybe an employee is feeling overwhelmed, but is not being given an opportunity to express himself or herself. So the type of work the person could be doing could be impacting the mental well-being of somebody. But unless you're empathetic as a leader and listening actively and understanding where this employee is coming from, the struggle the employee is having, unless you take time to do that, then you'll miss out on utilizing these resources, which can be very helpful.
Is agreeing with you on how as a leader you must cultivate that safety and trust. And I think that this idea that when there is that empathy from you as a leader, people are more likely to come and tell you when they're struggling. I think that's really crucial to highlight. And so what you're saying then, Elsie, is that there are preventative measures that we should take. So there's things that we should roll out within our organizations that support people so that they are finding that balance as far as their mental health is concerned. But then as an organization, we must also provide support in the event that someone is struggling, right? So that they can get the help that they need. Thank you very much for that, Elsie. I think that's a really, really great insight. Beth, I want to come back to something that you talked about, this idea of this opportunity cost. And I'd love for you to share with us, if you don't mind, a moment when choosing empathy over a strict business decision led to unexpected success, right? And how do you ensure your leadership team consistently embraces and models empathy across the organization? Because you mentioned that it then needs to be a culture. So how do you support your leadership, at the different levels so that they too are rolling this out?
Yeah, a few years ago, I had a team member who was not really performing in their role, and the immediate business decision is to let them go, and get someone who would be able to do the role better. But I was aware that this team member's mother was ill, and this team member was responsible for taking care of the medical expenses for their mother. So while I did have to take them out of the role, and because it was a critical role, and somebody had to come and fill it in so that things wouldn't fall through the cracks, I created another role for them to take on until their mother was out of hospital. And so because of that, there was actually an overlap between the person who took their role and them, and they were able to do a very like a much more effective handover, and there were introductions to the necessary people that had to be made. And here I just thought, like, can I afford to keep them on for a few more months just so that they can be able to take care of their mother? And looking at the books, the answer was yes. And so I made that decision, created that role, and kept them there until such a time. But I did make them aware of what I was doing, such that when the time came, it was not a surprise that yes, you need to leave, but I'm extending this just because I want you to be able to do what you need to do for your mom. So talking about how I've seen it manifest, recently in the organization, we had a bit of a challenge with another team member who doesn't report to me. But because of my engagements with that team member, I was able to see them extend grace and empathy to whoever on their team was having a performance issue, and even recommend like remedies which were able to build them as a person, to get them to a place where in the future they would not make the same mistake that they did. So I think when it becomes culture in the organization, you see this start to translate at all levels. Yeah.
Kudos to you for being able to make a decision with head and heart, right? I think that far too often as leaders, we want to make decisions just with the head, and that can have consequences. They can be an opportunity cost, to your earlier point, that we just don't realize in how it impacts the people that we lead and the morale of the team. So being able to make that decision to support someone through, what must have been a really challenging time. But I like the point you made that you still had the conversation. So that goes back to Jeremy's point about still having that accountability element, even as you extend yourself to support the member of the team. Let me stay with you, Yukabeth. What advice would you give to leaders who struggle with showing vulnerability or emotional connection with their team? Because you said that at the heart of empathy is connection. So what if that's not something that I'm strong in? That's not my strength as a leader. I'm not good at that small talk. I'm not good at getting to know how your weekend was, because I don't really want to share with you what my weekend was like. How do I navigate that and navigate it without pretense, right? So I'm sure what you're not, what we don't want to do is pretend that I'm interested. So how do I navigate that if it's a struggle for me?
Yeah, just look at it like any other technical skill in your organization, because we look at the accounting, we look at the monitoring and evaluation, and we say, we can't do that, so we're going to hire someone who can do that. So it goes the same for the soft skills and the values that you want to show up in your organization. Bring someone on board in your people team or your HR team who is going to be able to help you to shape that culture in your organization. So if you're not able to make those connections, get somebody who would be able to facilitate your organization to be able to make those connections. Yeah.
That's a really great answer. So ultimately, it's not necessary for you as a leader to be all things. As a
No,
leader, and this
you
goes
can't.
back to, yes, this goes back to Elsie's point about self-awareness, right? So once I recognize that, okay, this thing is a bit hard for me. I'm not so strong at these connections, and especially if it's a culture we want to cultivate, I'm not going to be able to drive that. So recognizing that and bringing in the skill set that you need. I think that's a really great observation, and I think that applies to all things where, as leaders, we see that we're not doing so well. Jeremy, thinking about what Yukabeth just said. So, as a leader, perhaps I am not able to drive this culture, and I'm bringing on someone, or perhaps I am the kind of leader who is able to drive that culture. How can we as an organization continue to build that culture beyond just what I am doing, right? Beyond what I am modeling? How can we build this culture that fosters, personal and professional growth through empathic leadership?
I think an efficient way of building that culture would be regular and frequent check-ins on a holistic point of view. Because performance is not only about what's on paper, but also someone's aspirations, someone's long-term goals. Because to understand the person, you need to understand their experiences, their current life, and where they're going. So once you do that, it also opens channels for people, channels and opportunities for people to take risks, for people to ask questions and even have open discussions without fear of judgment or reprimand. Because especially with a lot of expectation falling on millennials and Gen Zs in the workplace right now, people are always looking for fresh ideas. You're always looking for how better or how faster to do something. So once you create an avenue where not only do I feel safe mentally to work there, but I also feel safe to take risks, knowing that I have the support of my superiors, the support of my management, or even to ask questions about how to alternatively do things that might be more efficient, that encourages the kind of growth and the kind of development an organization might need.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Jeremy. I think, we underestimate how important safety is to people, right? And how important, how much safety, that psychological safety, that mental safety, what impact it has on our ability to do the work that we do. I think that's a really, really great point. Elsie, let's look at it from an HR perspective then, because we've talked about what we can do as leaders, but how can HR professionals support their leaders to develop this emotional intelligence competency of empathy?
Thank you. It's clear that emotional intelligence helps the leaders to coach the teams, reduce stress, deliver feedback, and also manage their team in a collaborative way. Empathy, emotions are data, so we cannot ignore that. And we know even in 6 seconds, we say that know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself is what we talk about in 6 seconds. So when it comes to the HR being involved, we remember the 4 competencies of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So I'm thinking of it in 4 ways. One, if there's a conflict in the section, for example, in my office that as a leader that I'm having to take care of, and there's a lot of blame game happening and all this that's not helping, the HR professional can come in and help the leaders face the challenge with empathy and rationale so they can understand the root of the conflicts. This can only be done if there's self-management that is happening, where they have the ability to manage their emotions in a way that the results will be more productive. I'm also thinking in terms of employees who want to engage but also grow. So emotional intelligence will help the leader understand and connect with these employees in a better way. So what the HR manager will do is to create an empathetic relationship environment where they are able to collaborate better, because then there's the ability to influence, to coach, which the HR can help the leader do. What about managing the employees? Maybe the leader is wondering, how do I manage these employees in an optimal way? So the HR manager can come in and help the leader analyze and understand their own emotions and how to manage the other people's emotions where there is need for that. And that's where self-awareness comes in. And finally, the HR officer can also come in creating a positive work environment where there is a positive culture. And this can happen through harnessing communication and mutual respect. And this is very important because then there's social awareness, where the way you treat each other, the way you handle each other is amicable. So where there's high EQ, the HR leaders contribute to strong relationship, resolve conflicts, and improve the organization productivity.
One thing that really comes through from the conversation we've had today is the fact that as a leader, there are skills that you're going to have to continue investing in developing. And I think that emotional intelligence, and more particularly empathy, is one of those. For some leaders, empathy comes naturally, right? An example I always use is if you're watching a group of kids on a playground, you will find that where one of the children falls over, perhaps there's one child who runs to their side to check if they're okay. And we would say that that child maybe has natural empathic tendencies. So when they see someone hurting, they just naturally have an inclination to check, to connect, to see how they can help. And so that child may grow up, manifest this in leadership very naturally. But there are others where empathy doesn't come naturally. It's not something that is your default. It's not something that you have just come by naturally. It may be something that you have to put in the work for. And it's really important to recognize this as leaders, that there are some competencies that we may need to work on. And then yet other competencies where we need additional support over and above the individual work that we may be doing. So thank you very much for sharing your reflections, Elsie. I'm going to come to our audience soon and ask if you have any questions for my panel. You can ask your questions to an individual person. So if you have a specific question for Yukabeth, for Elsie, for Jeremy, based on what you've read about them, based on what they've said so far, you're welcome to share it. Alternatively, if you have a question to everyone, you can also post it if you don't mind who answers it. I want to ask my question first before I see if there's any questions that have come through from our audience. And thanks again to all those who are with us live here today. My question is, when, and either of you can, any of you, sorry, can answer this. When have you experienced empathy in such a way that it has really positively impacted you and made you, more willing to work, or made you more committed to an organization? And actually, I know I said anyone can answer, but Jeremy, I want to put you on the spot a little here. And I'd like to ask you, in your experience, especially because you work in an environment of sales, which can be a bit dog eat dog. So have you experienced empathy that has really moved you? Someone has extended that empathy towards you in a way that you felt was very positive, and it had a positive impact on your work. And I know I'm putting you on the spot with the question, but I'm really curious to hear your reflections on how empathy has impacted you.
Yes, I have experienced empathy, especially in the sales field. Which, yes, it is rare because it's more or less a dog-eat-dog environment, everyone trying to rack in the numbers and all. But I was lucky enough to have a boss who communicated not only in regards to work, but she also wanted to know what's happening outside my work life. Like, what are my hobbies? What am I doing in the weekend? How am I spending my time aside from work? Because also, one thing I got to learn about the sales environment is once you start working, it basically could give you the possibility of taking over your life. So you'd be working from 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and all that. So you having that work-life balance and your boss actually encouraging you to have that, um, makes you feel more or less like a person. So not only was she checking on us work-wise, but she was looking after us holistically. How is our life at home? How's the family? Are you doing anything about furthering your education or training more? So with that open line of communication and with someone who was understanding as she is, and I think she still is, it leads you to wanting to give your whole to the company. It makes you want to work better, to make her seem, to show her off to, of course, her superiors as well, because she definitely has to answer to someone. So her showing empathy to us as a team definitely encourages us to work more, because we know we do not want to let her down as for when she answers to the next person or the next level of management. So yes, I have experienced empathy, and it really does push you to be the best version of yourself, not only in the work environment, but outside the work environment.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing, and a big shout out to that leader who did go out of their way. And I think it goes back to the comments that you all made around empathy being about connecting, about listening, about getting to know your people. And I think this is something that hopefully, if you're a leader listening in, you can take away that in order to build those empathic relationships, you need to start by getting to know your people. You could, but Elsie, you want to add anyone with a similar story about empathy and how it impacted you? No? Okay, that's fine. I just thought I would check. So I'm having a look to see if we have any questions that have come through from our audience. I don't see any question as yet right now. So I'm keeping my eye on the questions that may come. So let's start winding up. Well, I mean, bringing our conversation together, right? So that people can come away with some practical uh, steps that they can take. So what I'd like from each of you is some practical strategies, right? And what I'd love to hear from you is practical strategies from an individual perspective, and then practical strategies from an organizational perspective. You're all leaders in the spaces where you operate. And so, what are some practical strategies that I can implement as an individual to foster greater empathy? So, to be more empathic, to show up more in a more empathic way. And then, what can we do as an organization to cultivate a more empathic environment? So, I'm asking this to all of you. I think it would be great for us as we start winding down our conversation to really give our viewers some practical strategies that they can apply. So, Jeremy, we can stay with you since you just answered the last question, and you can share yours. Then we'll come to you, Kabeth, and then Elsie will come to you. So, as I said, strategies both from an individual perspective and from an organizational perspective.
I think from an organizational perspective, team buildings do really offer an opportunity for people, for the team to collaborate, for people to work together and actually get to know each other outside the work environment. Another way of doing so is, as leaders, we also need to recognize that the staff and the employees and the people working with us actually have lives outside the workplace. So fostering an environment where not only do you work for me, but you also need to maybe pick up your kids. You need to do something. You need to be a wife. You need to be a husband outside, of course, the parameters of work, and offering empathy enough to let them be that and be that as best as they could, while still being accountable for what they have to do within the hours, gives them the opportunity to actually push themselves more, because they understand that this empathy I'm being shown is not for no cause, but just to
Yeah.
let me be who I am in the best way possible. I think as individuals, something a lot of people need to actually allow and actually go for is open dialogue and open communication without criticism, because most of the time people do not talk because they don't know what to say, but they don't talk because of fear of criticism or fear of backlash.
Mm,
So an open line of dialogue and communication free of backlash and free enough to share ideas and all, actually promotes it enough to allow someone to push themselves more, to work better, and to actually live a healthier life while in the work environment.
I want to stay with you a little bit, Jeremy, because you said something that's really important. But I want us to kind of, I want to dig a little deeper. So when you talk about, creating that open environment, because I agree 100%. What does that look like? Is it just me saying I have an open door policy? What does that open environment look like? So people really genuinely feel that they can come and, share what's going on, give feedback, push back if necessary. What does that actually look like? How do I do that?
It looks like actively listening, and not just listening to respond, but listening to understand. Listening to understand someone's experiences, whatever they're going through, whether it's at work, whether it's with clients, whether it's at home, but just actively listening to understand what is going on in their life. You don't, as a leader, you don't have to respond at that moment, but as long as you understand and process whatever is going on in that person's situation, then you can actually sit and self-reflect to give a better answer. Because I feel like a lot of times we do tend to make decisions quickly because maybe time is of essence or something like that. But if you do also once in a while sit and self-reflect about that kind of the decision you made, not only do you learn better or do you learn how to make it maybe answer it better, but it gives you also the opportunity to be vulnerable with the person, maybe go back to them, check in on them, find out how whatever it was that they were dealing with is going on at that particular moment or after a period of time.
Yeah, listening is actually a real superpower, I think, for leaders, and yet often we don't exercise it. And sometimes it's because there's a lot on your plate, right? How easy is it to listen? If you're leading a large team, how easy is it for you to really be intentional about listening to each of them? But it seems to me from this conversation we're having today that it's really a critical skill. Yukabeth, practical strategies from your perspective for individuals and for the organization?
Yeah, number one, co-sign to everything Jeremy said. I definitely want to put it out there that like empathy is still something that I'm learning and it's a journey for me. And I think my practical strategies are things that are coming to me as I go on this journey of learning to extend empathy to my team, but also even to friends and family. The best relationships are those that are give and take. And so if as a leader you feel like you're always extending empathy, but nobody really cares about how you are. And I love that Jeremy said that because she cared about them, we wanted to make her shine. And so as a leader, you also have to be intentional about creating those spaces for your team also to connect with you. So when your team member asks you, how are you doing? Don't give a surface the opportunity to get to know you, to give them the chance to also extend that empathy to you. Because what happens when like you're always the one extending empathy, then it gets tiring for any individual because we are humans. So I think the practical skill I would share is, while you want to connect with people and find out how they're doing, have that openness to also share with your team your human side as well. Yeah.
Love that. I almost felt like saying amen, preach, because I think that's just so important, right? That idea that then it means we as leaders need to be a little vulnerable too and allow people in so that they can extend empathy to us too, right? And I think that's a really, really important point. Elsie, your reflections, practical strategies.
I also co-sign what Yokabeth and Jeremy has said. Especially the part of listening as a leader. I listen actively, not to respond or interpret, but be curious. What exactly is so and so telling me? And what's going on there? Because then they'll get deeper and become more open and tell you more. In addition to that, how about also rewarding employees who have exhibited empathy? Acknowledging the employees would be something you could do, because this would encourage the other people to also be empathetic to each other and pay attention and realize so and so is not doing well. what else can I do to support them? Also, how about organizing empathy training, where, because it's a skill that can be acquired and we all don't have it. So organizing those trainings could also be helpful. And how about when you're recruiting the staff, having a component where when you're asking the questions, you put empathy in there so that you can assess how well the candidate is in terms of their empathy level. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I like it. I love the idea of rewarding the humanness of people in the team, because we often just reward the tangible, feasible results they've generated, right? So for a sales team, Jeremy, we reward the numbers on the board. But how about actually rewarding the salesperson who connected with the client? I love that. I think that's a really great point, Elsie, because it then would support us in creating the environment that we want to see. We have a couple of questions that I want to come to, and then we'll come back to your parting shot as we wind up. So there's two questions that have come through. One is from Wildest Dreams. Thank you for being here again. This is one of our most faithful viewers. Many of us have experienced situations where we felt our leader or organization lacked empathy. What actionable steps can we take to communicate our need for empathy to our leaders? So I think this is a really great question. So empathy does not exist. You're working with someone who is lacking in empathy. So how do you express your need for empathy? Anyone want to respond to that one? Everyone's quiet. Let me give you the second one so you can have more time to think. Let me give you the second one, then I'll come to an answer. So I saw someone unmuted, but let me just give you the second one. So the second one is, how can we create opportunities for more? Oh, interestingly, this is actually connected. Wow. How can we create opportunities for more human connection and build a foundation for empathy, especially with emotionally distant leaders? All right. So I think from a leader perspective, you've already shared, because the question also says, or even as a leader. So I think from a leader perspective, you guys have shared some great strategies and ideas. But again, this is a question around connecting with an emotionally distant leader. So the questions seem to be around navigating an environment where you're not getting that empathy from your leader, or you're being led by an emotionally distant leader. How do you navigate that? So happy to hear your thoughts on those two questions.
Okay. I could take the first one,
Sure.
which is what are actionable steps that we can take to communicate our need for empathy to our leaders. And maybe I won't answer it as to leaders, but to anybody like within the
Mm,
workplace,
mm,
because I once had to do that. So I had so I have this habit of walking into people's offices and saying hello and like bothering them, to be very honest. And I noticed that when I would walk into the office where they were sitting, they would never look up from their computer to acknowledge me or say hello to me. And it hurt me because I'm human.
mm,
And so I
mm.
looked for an opportunity to let them know. And it took a while before I found just the perfect moment. But I did let them know, and it changed after that. So the actionable steps is to actually communicate and find a suitable time to actually sit down with them and let them know how you're feeling, because they were surprised to hear like that like it was an unconscious thing that they were doing, and if I hadn't told them, it would have gone on and it would have continued hurting me. So I think just finding time to actually have those conversations. Yeah.
I love that. And I like the point you've made that it's finding an appropriate time, right? It may not be immediately, and it's definitely not kind of throwing a temper tantrum in the moment. It's about finding a productive way to express. And I like what you said about expressing how it makes me feel, because no one can argue with my emotions, right? If I feel a certain way because of something you've done or said, I'm entitled to that because those are my feelings. And so when we make it about I, it helps us to express what we're feeling a lot more effectively. Thank you very much for that. So find an appropriate time to actually express. And to Yukabet's point, you may be shocked that someone didn't even realize what they were doing, was hurting you. Elsie, Jeremy, any other comments on those questions?
I think maybe just to add on what Yukabet said, sometimes it's not because that they're emotionally distant, but people tend to wear different masks at work. So whomever you do see from 8 to 5 is not who he is from 6 to 9 or 5 to 9. So it's basically about maybe understanding his kind of communication style. What I found that worked for me is maybe start by maybe asking for advice or asking for input from them, because sometimes leaders want to feel involved in whatever's happening. They want to be to actually be part of whatever is going on below them. So asking for advice definitely sets up grounds for mutual respect and connection, and you can from that you can actually build on it. So the more you guys collaborate in whatever you're doing, the more you ask for advice, the more you guys exchange ideas, the more you actually start relating, start conversing, and it opens doors to actually find out more about him. How is he doing? Maybe you might find one day he's in a gloomy mood. You can actually even now dive into that. But it's a process. It's not a one-time thing, but it takes constant communication and constant reaching out.
That's so great. I really like that point. So, sometimes we look at things from the point of view of what the leaders need to do, but this is also from the point of view of what the team members need to do, right? And so you two can look for ways to connect, look for opportunities where you can build a relationship with your leader and communicate with them. Elsie, I saw you unmuted. You wanted to share something as well.
Yes, in addition to communicating and also saying what it is you need to say, I was thinking about creating a caring culture, a culture where there are certain things that this organization is known for. So once you've created this platform, it's the right time and you've communicated what it is that you want to communicate, then come up with suggestions on what it is that you think would foster empathy. Is it having a team? Because I used to work in a very stressful organization for 20 years. And we used to be very intentional that on the last Wednesday of the month, no working, no seeing friends, then we would have a time to connect as colleagues over pizza, over a drink in the office. We don't even have to go out. And that way we got to know each other better, because now we are no longer working, giving people documents, and because of a very busy office. But that one day made a lot of difference, because then we could see and be able to talk, laugh in ways that would be impactful. So have suggestions even as you communicate what it is you need or want. And as you do that, be very objective and listen to each other.
Sharing those responses. I found the answers that you needed. And indeed, to everyone who is logged in now, or if you're going to watch this later, you found our discussion one that's really useful. So I'm going to share my kind of 3 takeaways as we wind up, and then I'm going to come to each of you to share your parting shot as we close. So I think for me, the biggest thing I've heard today is empathy is about connection. It's about really intentionally getting to know the people that you are leading and recognizing that they are human beings and they have a life outside of the workplace. And I think this is really critical. At the heart of connecting is your ability to communicate. And at the heart of that is listening, right? So the second biggest takeaway for me is the reminder to listen, and to not just listen in preparation for what you're going to say next, but to truly listen. And I think Yuka Beth mentioned this, and Elsie mentioned this when she talked about listening the first time around, not with distractions. So put away your computer, put away your phone, truly lean in and listen. I'm learning that it's far better to tell team members that you can't stop right now. Can they come back in 5 minutes? Can you find them in 30 minutes? Than trying to multitask. You would rather let people know I'm in the middle of a report. I really must send it. I can't take the time to listen to you. And I want to be able to give you my undivided attention. Can we circle back in 30 minutes or in an hour? Can I come and find you in your office, whatever it is, so that I can finish what I'm working on and give you my undivided attention? It's far better to do that than to think you can continue with the report and listen at the same time. So number two for me is a reminder to listen, listen, listen. And I think that, the third takeaway, and I'm probably biased in this takeaway, is around self-awareness. Just really getting to know yourself as a leader so that how well you're doing this empathy thing, how well you're listening. And actually, there's always room for improvement. How you can improve, right? What you can do to grow yourself as a leader. Ultimately, if we want to cultivate a culture of empathy within the organization, it starts with a leader. And I think there's been some great insights that have been shared by Elsie, Jeremy, and Yukabeth. Those are my three takeaways. I'd love to hear what your key takeaway is. Please do share in the comments. What's your biggest takeaway from our conversation today? And you can share that now, or you can come back and share it a little later. And for those who are watching later, please do type it in. We really would love to hear from you. So, to my fantastic panel, let me hear your parting shot. Elsie, what is your final reflection as we wind up our conversation on this topic of love and leadership, and how to really be an empathic leader?
Thank you. For me, my takeaway is the best leaders are empathetic. They are self-aware. They are inclusive. They always pause to show that they care. And by so doing, they cultivate the qualities that create a workplace that is empathetic, where the empathy thrives. The relationships are valued, and where there's collaboration. So anytime, let's strive towards being empathetic, because it is the best way to go.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yukabeth, your parting shot?
My favorite story from this webinar is the story that Jeremy shared about him and his manager. And the kind of relationship they had, that she showed care for them, and in turn they wanted to see the best for her. It would be great to see teams work like that. And I know that there's a lot for us to learn as an organization, and I hope that we can grow to be as supportive to each other as that environment was as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Last but not least, your final reflection.
I think my final reflection will come as an employee rather than as a leader. And I'd say that looking up to leaders, leadership comes with authority. And with empathy, that authority turns into trust. And once your team trusts you, then whatever tasks, whatever deliverables you give them turn into teamwork, because they can actually collaborate with each other. They can bounce questions off of each other, bounce questions to you. So an environment that actually opens up an ability for us to be seen and heard and actually valued for what we are, for who we are and what we do, not only for what we have to offer as far as figures are concerned. Not only boost our mental well-being, but also boost our productivity in the workplace.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. As I tell you guys always, if you bring your lunch, we will bring the learning. My panel have been phenomenal. Thank you so much, Elsie. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you, Yukabeth. I hope that if we call you again, you will join us to share your amazing gems. I'm going to say goodbye to you all now. Thank you very much, everyone else, for tuning in today. It has been so great having you on, participating in our Lunch and Learn for today. Diarize the next one, the last Wednesday of the month is when we meet. And so we will be having another similar awesome conversation. Natasha, I see a question you've shared about empathy as a key factor in choosing an employer? I think 100% it is, because at the end of the day, as Jeremy said earlier, you're in the workplace a very long time. And if you're working in an environment that is toxic, working with a manager where you're not getting support, it's ultimately going to affect your well-being and your productivity. And so even though you may choose to work in that environment, you will find that you won't stay. And so I think more and more individuals are going to be factoring in the human side of the leader, the human side of the organization, as to whether or not to join, and when they join, whether or not to stay. So thank you very much, Sylvia. Great to have you with us today. As I said, diarize the last Wednesday of March. We'll be back again. It's International Women's Day, and we'll be talking about equity. It's International Women's Day on the 8th of March. And as a nod to that, we're going to be talking about equity. And we're talking about how emotional intelligence helps us to navigate bias. So looking forward to that conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and make the final days of February count. The year is flying by. Great to see you as always. Until next time, goodbye.